The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of their Montecito home, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floors. Meghan sat cross-legged on the Persian rug in their living room, her dark hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater and jeans, the kind of casual outfit that had become her uniform since moving to California. In front of her, 18-month-old Archie Harrison sat surrounded by colorful wooden blocks, his chubby fingers working to stack them into wobbly towers. Harry emerged from the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in his hands. His red hair was slightly tousled from sleep, and he wore a navy blue t-shirt that had seen better days. The informal atmosphere was a stark contrast to the rigid formality they had left behind in England. Here, in their sanctuary, they could simply be parents. "He's been at it for 20 minutes, Meghan whispered as Harry settled beside her on the floor, handing her a mug. "Look at his concentration." Archie's tongue poked out slightly as he focused intently on placing a red block on top of a blue one. His auburn hair, so much like his father's, caught the morning light. His serious expression reminded Meghan of Harry when he was deep in thought, that same furrow appearing between his eyebrows. "He gets that from you," Harry murmured, his voice soft with affection as he watched his son. "That determination. The stubbornness, you mean?" Meghan laughed quietly, taking a sip of her coffee. The familiar warmth spread through her chest, though whether from the drink or the peaceful moment, she couldn't say. The past year had been a whirlwind of change and adjustment. Moving across the ocean, establishing their new life, dealing with the constant media attention, and navigating the complex emotions that came with stepping back from royal duties. There had been sleepless nights, not just because of a teething baby, but because of the weight of their decisions and the uncertainty of their future. But moments like this made everything else fade away. Watching their son discover the world, seeing Harry relax into fatherhood without the pressure of protocol, and feeling the genuine peace that came with making choices based on love rather than obligation. Archie suddenly looked up at them, his blue-gray eyes bright with excitement. He pointed at his tower of blocks and opened his mouth, making the babbling sounds that had become his primary form of communication. "Babie de mama," he said earnestly, as if explaining something very important. "Oh, is that right, sweetheart?" Meghan responded, her voice taking on the gentle tone she used when talking to him. "Tell us more about your tower." Harry set down his coffee mug and crawled closer to Archie, making himself small to be at his son's eye level. "That's a brilliant tower, mate," he said, his British accent warm with pride. "Are you going to make it even taller?" Archie clapped his hands together, causing his carefully constructed tower to wobble dangerously. Both parents held their breath, but the blocks held. The little boy's face broke into a wide smile, showing his few teeth, and he clapped again, this time with more enthusiasm. "Careful, Archie," Meghan said, reaching out instinctively to steady the tower. But Harry gently caught her hand. "Let him figure it out," he said softly. "He needs to learn." It was something they had discussed many times, this balance between protection and freedom. Both of them had experienced childhoods where protection sometimes felt like a prison. Harry had grown up in the spotlight, every mistake magnified and analyzed. Meghan had fought her way through industry barriers and social expectations. They were determined to give Archie something different, the security to explore and make mistakes without the weight of the world watching. Archie seemed to understand the delicate nature of his creation. He moved more carefully now, picking up a yellow block and studying it seriously before deciding where to place it. His small fingers were surprisingly steady as he set it gently on top of the red block. "Good job, buddy," Harry whispered, his voice thick with emotion. These simple moments of watching his son learn and grow affected him more deeply than he had expected. Perhaps it was because his own childhood had been so scrutinized, or perhaps it was the simple joy of witnessing pure, unfiltered discovery. Meghan noticed the emotion in Harry's voice and reached over to squeeze his hand. They had learned to read each other's moods, to offer comfort without words. The transition to their new life hadn't always been smooth, and there were days when the weight of their decisions felt overwhelming. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. The sound of Harry's phone buzzing broke the peaceful silence. He glanced at it and sighed. "It's my security team," he said. "I should take this."
Go ahead, Meghan said. We'll be right here.
Harry stepped into the next room to take the call, his voice becoming businesslike as he discussed logistics for an upcoming engagement. Even in their new life, there were still obligations, still people who needed their attention and support. Meghan turned back to Archie, who was now attempting to balance a triangle-shaped block on top of his tower. "That's a tricky one, isn't it, love?" she said, moving closer to him. Archie looked at her with such seriousness that she almost laughed. He seemed to be weighing his options, understanding that this block was different from the others. After a moment of consideration, he set the triangle aside and picked up another square block instead. "Smart boy," Meghan murmured, stroking his soft hair. "You know what works and what doesn't." She found herself thinking about the choices they had made as a family. Like Archie with his blocks, they had tried different approaches, discarded what didn't work, and built something new. It hadn't always been easy, and there had been moments when everything had felt ready to topple over. The criticism had been harsh. The media had questioned every decision, every statement, every appearance. There had been commentary about Meghan's parenting, Harry's relationship with his family, and speculation about their financial situation. Some days, the negativity felt suffocating. But, here, in the quiet of their home, watching their son play and learn, the outside world seemed very far away. This was what mattered. This small person who depended on them, who looked at them with complete trust and love, who didn't care about titles or protocols or public opinion. Harry returned, sliding his phone into his pocket with a slight frown. "Everything okay?" Meghan asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. "Just the usual," he said, settling back down on the floor. "Schedule adjustments, security concerns. Nothing urgent." It was their reality now, this constant balance between their desire for privacy and their continued public roles. They had stepped back from senior royal duties, but they couldn't step away from who they were entirely. There were still charities to support, causes to champion, and a level of public interest that would never completely disappear. Archie had successfully added 2 more blocks to his tower during Harry's brief absence. The structure now stood nearly as tall as the little boy himself, swaying slightly but holding steady. "Wow, Archie!" Harry exclaimed, his earlier concerns melting away as he focused on his son. "Look how tall you made it." Archie beamed at the praise, clapping his hands again. This time, the vibration from his clapping caused the tower to sway more dramatically. All 3 of them watched, holding their breath, as the blocks wobbled precariously. "Oh no," Meghan whispered, instinctively reaching out again. But Archie seemed unconcerned by the instability. He watched the swaying blocks with fascination rather than worry, as if the movement itself was part of the game. When the tower finally tumbled, blocks scattering across the rug in different directions, he burst into delighted giggles. The sound of his laughter filled the room, pure and uninhibited. Both parents found themselves laughing too, caught up in their son's joy. It was a reminder that sometimes the best part of building something was watching it fall down and starting over again. "Again!" Archie said suddenly, the word clear and unmistakable. Both Meghan and Harry froze. Had they heard correctly? They looked at each other, then back at their son, who was already reaching for the scattered blocks. "Did he just?" Meghan began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Again!" Archie repeated, holding up a blue block and looking directly at his parents. There was no mistaking it this time. It was a real word, clearly spoken and definitely intentional. Harry's eyes filled with tears as the significance of the moment hit him. His son's first word. Not mama or dada as they had expected, but, again, a word full of hope and possibility, a desire to keep trying, to rebuild, to start over. Meghan felt her own tears starting as she reached for Harry's hand. This moment, this perfect, unexpected moment, would be theirs forever. Not captured by photographers, not analyzed by commentators, not shared with the world until they chose to share it. Just theirs, as a family, in the peace of their own home. Again, she whispered back to Archie, her voice full of wonder. "Yes, sweetheart, we can do it again." And, as their son began gathering blocks for another tower, both parents realized that this moment, somehow captured everything they hoped for their new life. The chance to try again, to build something better, to create their own version of happiness without the constraints of what others expected. The morning sun continued to stream through their windows, and, for the first time in many months, everything felt exactly as it should be. The afternoon had taken on a magical quality following Archie's first clear word. Meghan found herself moving through their home with a lightness she hadn't felt in months, pausing occasionally to replay the moment in her mind. Harry had called his father, his voice trembling slightly as he shared the news. Even across the ocean, the joy in his voice had been unmistakable. He said again, "Dad," Harry had explained, standing by the window overlooking their garden. Just like that, clear as day. He wanted to rebuild his tower after it fell down. Meghan watched from the kitchen as Harry spoke to his father, noting how his shoulders relaxed during the conversation. These calls had become easier over time, less fraught with tension and unspoken expectations. The distance had allowed for healing, for finding new ways to connect that didn't involve duty or protocol. Archie was napping now, exhausted from his morning of discovery. They had spent another hour building towers, each time waiting with bated breath to see if he would repeat his new word. He had, delighting in the effect it had on his parents, seeming to understand that something special had happened. "Your mom wants to video call later," Harry said as he rejoined Meghan in the kitchen. "She's beside herself with excitement." Meghan smiled, thinking of her mother Doria's likely reaction. As a grandmother, she had been patient and supportive, visiting when possible and maintaining her relationship with Archie despite the geographical distance. The prospect of hearing about his first word would probably have her crying happy tears. "We should record him saying it," Meghan suggested, though the words felt strange coming out of her mouth. For so long, their instinct had been to protect these private moments from any form of documentation, worried about how they might be used or interpreted. "For family, you mean?" Harry asked, understanding her hesitation. "For us," she said quietly. "So we never forget exactly how it sounded." They had learned to be careful about what they documented and where they stored it. Their private moments had been violated before, personal photos and conversations leaked and analyzed. But this felt different. This was about preserving a memory for themselves, not for anyone else. Harry pulled out his phone and scrolled to the voice recording app. "When he wakes up," he said. "Maybe we can get him to say it again." The doorbell chimed, interrupting their planning. They exchanged glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors always made them slightly nervous. Harry moved toward the front door while Meghan stayed in the kitchen, listening. "Tyler," she heard Harry say, relief evident in his voice. It was their neighbor, a documentary filmmaker who had become a genuine friend. He lived quietly on the adjacent property and had proven to be refreshingly uninterested in their celebrity status. "Sorry to bother you," Tyler's voice carried through the house. "I'm heading to the farmer's market and wanted to see if you needed anything." It was typical of their Montecito community, neighbors who looked out for each other without fanfare or expectation. After years of transactional relationships and calculated interactions, these simple gestures of friendship meant everything to them. "Actually, could you grab some of those organic carrots Archie likes?" Meghan called out, joining them in the entryway. "The ones from the farm stand near the back?" "Of course," Tyler smiled. "How's the little man today?" "He said his first word this morning," Harry announced, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. Tyler's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That's incredible. What was it?" Again, Meghan said, and just saying it out loud made her emotional all over again. "That's perfect," Tyler laughed. "Knowing Archie, that makes complete sense. He's always been determined to keep trying things until he gets them right." It struck Meghan how well their friend knew their son, how he had observed Archie's personality during their casual interactions. This was what normal felt like, people who cared about them and their child without agenda or expectation. After Tyler left, they settled into the quiet rhythm of their afternoon. Harry worked on correspondence for their foundation while Meghan caught up on reading for an upcoming board meeting. The normalcy of it felt precious, just a couple managing their professional responsibilities while their child napped.
The piece was interrupted by Meghan's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and saw her publicist's name. With a small sigh, she answered. "Meghan, darling, how are you?" The voice was warm but businesslike. "I have something interesting to discuss with you." "What is it, Sarah?" Meghan asked, though she could already sense where this was heading. "We've been approached about a feature story opportunity.
A major magazine wants to do a piece about your family life in California, focusing on Archie's development and how you're both adapting to parenthood outside the royal framework."
Meghan felt her stomach tighten.
These requests came regularly, each promising to be different, more respectful, more honest than previous coverage. But they had learned to be skeptical of such assurances. "I don't think so," Meghan said automatically.
"We're not ready for that kind of exposure." "I understand the hesitation," Sarah continued. "But this could be an opportunity to control the narrative. To show people the real story of your family, on your terms." Harry looked up from his laptop, sensing the tension in Meghan's voice.
She met his eyes and shook her head slightly, letting him know this was another media request.
"Can I think about it?" Meghan asked, though she already knew what her answer would be.
"Of course. But don't take too long, they're hoping to move quickly on this." After ending the call, Meghan sat quietly for a moment. The juxtaposition was almost jarring, the pure joy of Archie's first word this morning, followed by the immediate desire to commodify and publicize their family life.
"Another interview request?" Harry asked gently.
"A feature story. They want to focus on Archie's development." Harry closed his laptop and moved to sit beside her on the couch.
"What did you tell them?"
"That I'd think about it. But, Harry, I don't want his first word to become part of some magazine story. I don't want them to turn this morning into content."
He nodded, understanding completely.
They had both struggled with the fine line between sharing their truth and protecting their privacy. Their children's experiences felt especially sacred, moments that should belong to them as a family before belonging to the public.
"We don't have to do it," he said simply. "We don't have to do any of it unless we want to."
The sound of Archie stirring came through the baby monitor, his sleepy sounds gradually becoming more awake and demanding. Meghan smiled despite her frustration with the phone call. "Let's go get him," she said. They climbed the stairs together, entering Archie's room to find him standing in his crib, hair mussed from sleep, looking around with bright, curious eyes. When he saw them, his face broke into a wide smile. "Again," he said immediately, reaching his arms up toward them.
Both parents burst into laughter.
Their son had somehow associated them with his new favorite word, as if their presence itself warranted repetition.
"Yes, again," Harry said, lifting Archie from his crib. "You can say it again anytime you want."
As they made their way back downstairs, Archie chattering happily in his father's arms, Meghan felt her earlier tension dissipating. This was what mattered. Not the magazine articles or the public perception or the constant pressure to share their story. Just this, their son learning and growing, their family finding its rhythm, their life unfolding at its own pace. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden, Archie toddling around on unsteady legs while they followed behind. Every few minutes, he would stop and look at them expectantly.
Again, he would ask, though the context wasn't always clear.
Sometimes he meant he wanted to be picked up again, or to have a ball thrown again, or to hear them sing the silly song they had made up about butterflies. But each time he said it, they responded with enthusiasm, reinforcing this wonderful new skill he had developed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, they found themselves back on the floor of their living room with the scattered blocks. Archie was determined to build another tower, though his energy was starting to flag.
"One more tower before dinner?" Meghan suggested, gathering the blocks together.
Again, Archie agreed seriously, reaching for a red block. As they worked together, helping their son stack the colorful pieces, Meghan found herself thinking about the conversation with her publicist. The outside world wanted access to moments exactly like this one, the intimacy, the genuine emotion, the unguarded joy of their family life. But, sitting here on their living room floor, watching their son's concentrated efforts to balance one block on another while the golden California sunshine streamed through their windows, she knew with absolute certainty that some things were too precious to share.
Some moments belonged only to them.
Again, Archie said proudly as he placed the final block on his tower, looking at his parents for approval.
Again, they both echoed, and, in that simple word was all the affirmation they needed.
They were building something beautiful together, a life, a family, a future, and they would keep building it, one block at a time, for as long as it took.
The evening brought with it a gentle coolness as Meghan prepared dinner while Harry gave Archie a bath.
Their son's delighted squeals echoed from the bathroom as he played with his rubber ducks, occasionally shouting his favorite new word when a toy would sink and, then, bob back to the surface.
Again!
Again came the happy cries, followed by splashing and Harry's patient laughter. Meghan found herself pausing in her cooking to listen to these sounds of domestic happiness. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined feeling this settled, this genuinely at peace. The journey to this moment had been marked by so much uncertainty and pain that she had begun to wonder if contentment was possible for their family. The trauma of the last few years in the UK had been deeper than she had initially realized. The constant criticism, the feeling of being misunderstood, the pressure to conform to expectations that felt impossible to meet, it had all taken a toll she was only beginning to recognize now that they were away from it. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her friend Jessica in Toronto. "How's my favorite little godson today?" Meghan smiled as she typed back, "He said his first word." Again, of course it would be something that means he wants more of everything.
The response came immediately, "I'm crying. Call me when you can, I want to hear everything."
These connections to her old life, to people who had known her before the royal family and the media scrutiny, felt like lifelines to her authentic self. Jessica had been there through all of it, the excitement of meeting Harry, the whirlwind romance, the challenging adjustment to royal life, and, finally, the difficult decision to step back.
"Mama!"
The voice from the bathroom made Meghan freeze. That was definitely Archie, and that was definitely another new word.
"Did you hear that?"
Harry called out, his voice filled with wonder. Meghan abandoned her cooking and rushed to the bathroom, where she found Harry kneeling beside the bathtub, his shirt soaked from enthusiastic splashing. Archie sat in the warm water, surrounded by floating toys, looking incredibly pleased with himself. "Mama," he said again, looking directly at Meghan with those bright eyes that seemed to see everything. Tears sprang to her eyes immediately. After months of data being Harry's exclusive domain, Archie had finally claimed her too. The words sounded perfect in his small voice, full of recognition and love. "Yes, sweetheart," she managed, kneeling beside Harry.
"I'm Mama."
"Mama," again, Archie declared, clapping his wet hands together.
Both parents burst into laughter, realizing their son was combining his vocabulary to make his needs known. He wanted his mama, and he wanted the joy of saying it again and again.
As they finished bath time together, taking turns helping Archie practice his new words, Meghan felt a profound shift happening inside her. For so long, she had carried the weight of feeling like she had failed at the royal role, like she hadn't been able to make it work despite her best efforts. But, watching her son's face light up as he said "Mama" over and over, she realized that her greatest success wasn't a title or a position, it was this little person who trusted her completely. Later, as they sat together for a family dinner, Archie in his high chair enthusiastically eating cut-up vegetables while practicing his expanding vocabulary, Harry brought up something that had been on both their minds. "I've been thinking about the interview requests," he said carefully, cutting Archie's carrots into smaller pieces.
"And?"
Meghan asked, though she suspected she knew where this was heading.
"I think we should consider it. Not because we have to, but because we want to." Meghan looked up from her salad, surprised. "What do you mean?"
Harry set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "I mean that today, listening to Archie say his first words, seeing how purely happy we all were, I realized that our story isn't about what we left behind anymore.
It's about what we're building."
"But, Harry, the last time we did a major interview was different," he finished. "That was about explaining our decision, defending ourselves, setting the record straight about the past.
This could be about the future. About Archie, about our family, about the work we're doing."
Meghan considered this, absently wiping Archie's face as he attempted to feed himself.
You think people are ready to hear a different story from us?
I think we're ready to tell one, Harry said. And I think Archie changed something for me today.
Hearing him say again, it made me realize that I want to try again too.
To engage with the world on our terms, to share what's actually happening in our lives instead of letting other people define it. It was a shift Meghan hadn't expected, but, as she thought about it, she could feel its logic. For over a year, they had been in defensive mode, protecting themselves and their son from unwanted attention. But perhaps there was a way to be proactive about their narrative while still maintaining their boundaries.
What kind of interview are you thinking? She asked. Something intimate. In our home.
Focused on family, on what we've learned about parenting, about building a life based on our values.
Not about the drama or the palace or the things that went wrong. Mama, again, Archie interjected, holding up a piece of avocado.
Yes, love, you can have more, Meghan said, giving him another piece while continuing to think about Harry's proposal. That night, after Archie was asleep, they sat together on their back patio overlooking the garden. The California stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was filled with the scent of jasmine from their neighbor's yard.
Do you remember what you said to me when we first talked about leaving?
Meghan asked, her head resting on Harry's shoulder.
Which part?
Harry's voice was soft in the darkness. You said you wanted to give Archie the childhood you never had. A life where he could just be himself without the weight of expectation and tradition.
I remember. I think about that a lot when I watch him play. How free he is, how curious.
He doesn't know yet that there are people who have opinions about his existence, who analyze his every expression or outfit choice.
Harry tightened his arm around her. He'll learn about all that eventually.
But, hopefully by then, he'll be secure enough in who he is that it won't matter as much.
That's what I want, Meghan said quietly.
For him to know that his worth isn't tied to what other people think of him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle sounds of their neighborhood settling in for the night. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear music from a neighbor's gathering, laughter carrying on the warm air.
You know what struck me today? Harry said eventually.
When Archie said again, he wasn't afraid that the tower might fall down.
He just wanted to keep building. He doesn't know about failure yet, Meghan observed. Everything is just another attempt to him. Maybe that's what we need to remember.
That starting over doesn't mean we failed the first time.
It just means we learned something.
Meghan lifted her head to look at him.
Are you talking about the interview, or something bigger?
Both, I think.
All of it.
Our relationship with the media, with the public, with our own story.
What if we approached it like Archie approaches his blocks? Not worried about what might fall down, just excited about what we might build?
The idea was both terrifying and liberating. For so long, their public appearances had been calculated to minimize damage, to avoid giving ammunition to critics, to protect themselves from further hurt. But what if they approached it from a place of joy instead of fear? If we did this interview, Meghan said slowly, I would want to talk about the real things. About how hard it was to adjust to new motherhood while dealing with constant judgment. About finding our way as a couple when everything around us was chaos. About what it's actually like to raise a child when you're both dealing with your own childhood trauma. Those are exactly the things I think people need to hear, Harry said. Not the fairy tale version, but not the disaster narrative either. Just the truth about trying to build something good. As if summoned by their conversation, they heard Archie stirring through the baby monitor.
His sleepy voice drifted down to them, Mama? Dada? Again?
They looked at each other and smiled. Even in his sleep, their son was asking for more comfort, more connection, more of the love that surrounded him. We should go to him, Meghan said, but neither of them moved immediately.
In a minute, Harry said.
I want to remember this, sitting here with you, making decisions about our future, listening to our son call for us.
This is what happiness sounds like.
When they finally went upstairs to check on Archie, they found him sitting up in his crib, not distressed but simply wanting reassurance that his parents were still there.
Again, he said softly when he saw them, reaching his small arms toward them. And, as they both reached back to comfort him, Meghan realized that this was exactly what they had been searching for all along: not perfection, not public approval, not even peace from criticism, but simply the knowledge that they could keep trying, keep building, keep choosing love again and again and again. 3 weeks had passed since Archie's first words transformed an ordinary morning into something extraordinary. His vocabulary had exploded in that time, as if saying again and Mama had unlocked some linguistic floodgate. Now he chattered constantly, a mixture of clear words and enthusiastic babble that filled their house with constant sound and joy. The interview had been scheduled and was happening today. After numerous conversations with their team, they had chosen to work with a journalist they trusted, someone who had covered their story fairly in the past. The crew was small, just the interviewer, a camera operator, and a sound technician, and they had agreed to film in the family's home. Meghan stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting a simple blue dress she had chosen for its comfort rather than its camera appeal. Her styling team had offered to come, but she had declined. If they were going to share their authentic selves, it felt important to look like their authentic selves. From downstairs, she could hear Harry talking to the crew as they set up their equipment in the living room. The same room where Archie had built his first successful tower of blocks, where he had spoken his first clear words, where they had spent countless quiet mornings as a family. "Mama! Again!" Archie's voice carried up the stairs, and Meghan smiled. Their son had developed the habit of announcing his needs and desires with increasing clarity, usually by combining the few words he knew into surprisingly effective commands. She found him in Harry's arms, both of them standing by the window watching the crew arrange lights and cameras. Archie was fascinated by the equipment, pointing at everything and providing a steady stream of commentary in his mixture of words and sounds. "How are you feeling?" Harry asked as Meghan joined them. "Nervous," she admitted. "But good nervous. Like when you're about to do something important." "Dada, again," Archie said, patting Harry's face with his small hands. "What do you want again, buddy?" Harry asked patiently. Archie pointed toward the living room where the crew was working. "Again," he declared, apparently wanting to return to his observation post. "He thinks this is all for his entertainment," Meghan laughed. "He has no idea we're about to have millions of people asking questions about our parenting choices." It was strange to think about. This intimate conversation they were about to have would eventually be watched by people around the world, analyzed and discussed and probably criticized. But, somehow, after these weeks of watching Archie's fearless approach to trying new things, their own fear felt less overwhelming. The interviewer, Sarah Collins, had arrived while Meghan was getting ready. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a reputation for thoughtful, in-depth conversations. More importantly, she was a mother herself, which had factored into their decision to work with her. "Before we start officially," Sarah said as they gathered in the living room, "I want you to know that this doesn't have to be about anything you don't want to discuss. If at any point you want to pause or redirect, we can do that." Harry and Meghan exchanged a look of relief. They had been burned before by interviewers who had promised one thing and delivered another. "We appreciate that," Harry said. "We want to be open, but we also want to protect our family." "Of course," Sarah nodded. "And, I have to say, your son is absolutely delightful. He's been providing commentary on our setup for the past 20 minutes. As if on cue, Archie toddled over to Sarah with a wooden block in his hand. "Again," he announced, offering her the toy. "Oh, thank you," Sarah said, accepting the block gravely. "This is very nice." "Again," Archie repeated, apparently pleased that she had taken his gift. "I think he wants you to admire it more," Meghan interpreted, settling onto the couch beside Harry. Sarah dutifully examined the block from all angles, praising its color and shape until Archie clapped with satisfaction and moved on to investigating a camera cable. "He's quite the little director," Sarah observed. "Making sure everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing." "That's definitely a trait he got from both of us," Harry said, reaching down to redirect Archie away from the expensive equipment. "We're both rather opinionated about how things should go." When they finally began recording, the conversation felt surprisingly natural. Sarah asked about their daily routines, their hopes for Archie's future, the challenges of parenting in the public eye. She was particularly interested in how they had created their current life in California, what they had learned about themselves as a couple and as parents. "People often ask us about regrets," Meghan said during one exchange. "Whether we regret the choices we made, the path we took. And, honestly, sitting here today, watching our son discover language and independence and joy, I can't imagine our lives going any other way." "The hardest part wasn't leaving," Harry added. "It was feeling like we had to choose between duty and happiness, between serving others and protecting our own family. But we've learned that those things don't have to be mutually exclusive." Throughout the interview, Archie provided a steady soundtrack of commentary and observation. Occasionally, he would approach them with a toy or a book, seeking attention or simply wanting to be included in whatever important thing the adults were clearly doing. "Again, Mama," he said during one particularly serious discussion about mental health, climbing onto Meghan's lap with his favorite stuffed elephant. "Yes, sweetheart," Meghan said, automatically making room for him while continuing to answer Sarah's question about seeking therapy. "Sometimes we all need to ask for help again and again until we get what we need." It struck her as she said it that Archie's favorite word had become something of a metaphor for their entire journey. The willingness to try again, to start over, to keep building even when previous attempts had been knocked down. When Sarah asked about their son's development, both parents lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "He said his first clear word just 3 weeks ago," Harry shared. "We were sitting right here, actually, and he had built this elaborate tower of blocks. When it fell down, instead of being upset, he looked at us and said again. He wanted to rebuild immediately." "It felt like such a perfect summary of his personality," Meghan added. "And, honestly, of what we've all been learning as a family. That falling down isn't failure, it's just information about how to build better next time." "Speaking of building," Sarah said, "you've both been quite busy with your foundation work and various projects. How do you balance that with family life?" "It's not always easy," Harry admitted. "We have help, which we're grateful for, but we also make sure that Archie is our priority. The work we do feels important, but he's the most important thing." "Dada!" Archie called from across the room, where he had discovered a particularly interesting lamp cord. "That's not a toy, mate," Harry said, getting up to redirect him once again. "Let's find something better." As Harry dealt with their mobile son, Meghan continued the conversation. "One thing that's been interesting is realizing how much of our previous life was scheduled for us, planned by other people. Here, we get to decide how we spend our time, what causes we support, how we raise our son. It's both liberating and terrifying." "What's the terrifying part?" Sarah asked. "The responsibility," Meghan said honestly. "When someone else is making the decisions, you can't be blamed if things go wrong. But, when it's your choice, when you're building something from scratch, every mistake feels more significant." Harry returned with Archie in his arms, having successfully distracted him with a different toy. "But, the mistakes are ours to make," he added, settling back beside Meghan. "And, the successes are ours to celebrate." As the interview continued, the afternoon light in their living room gradually shifted, creating a warm, golden atmosphere that felt almost dreamlike. At one point, Archie fell asleep in Harry's lap, his small body relaxed and trusting, completely unbothered by the cameras and conversation happening around him. "This is what we wanted," Meghan said softly, looking down at their sleeping son. "For him to feel this secure, this loved, this free to just be himself." Sarah asked about their hopes for the future, both for their family and for their public work. "We want to be useful," Harry said, his voice quiet to avoid waking Archie. "We want our lives to matter, to contribute something positive. But we also want to be present for these moments, these ordinary, extraordinary days when our son is learning who he is. There's something beautiful about watching him discover the world without cynicism," Meghan added. "He approaches everything with such openness, such enthusiasm. He believes that if something doesn't work the first time, you can always try again." As the interview wound down, Sarah asked one final question: "What do you want people to understand about your family, about your choices, about your future?"
Meghan and Harry looked at each other, then down at their sleeping son, and then back at Sarah. "That we're just trying to do our best," Meghan said finally.
"We're not perfect parents or perfect people.
We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we try again.
Just like everyone else. And that love is enough," Harry added.
Not to solve everything or to make everything easy, but to make everything worth it. To give you the courage to keep trying, keep building, keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today." As if he had heard them, Archie stirred in Harry's arms, opening his sleepy eyes and looking around at the adults surrounding him. Again, he asked hopefully, as if wondering whether this interesting day of new people and unusual activity might continue. Again, Meghan promised, reaching over to smooth his rumpled hair. "Tomorrow and every day after that.
We'll keep trying, keep building, keep loving again and again."
And, as the cameras finally stopped rolling and the crew began packing up their equipment, the family remained on their couch, Archie now fully awakened, babbling contentedly about his afternoon adventure. Outside, the California sun was setting, painting their windows in shades of gold and pink. They had shared their story, opened their home, offered their truth to the world. Whatever came next, criticism or praise, understanding or judgment, they would face it together. And, if they needed to start over, to try a different approach, to rebuild something better, they would do that too. After all, they had learned from the best teacher possible, a little boy who believed that everything was worth trying again.